Okay, so I'm going to start then. So welcome. Thank you for finding the time to attend this. So I'm going to talk about managing teams, well, managing work in teams. So a little bit about me. I work for a consultancy in the UK. So I work with a lot of clients who use Teams, even more who are rolling it out at the moment. And most of the time, one of the big questions that they come up with is how do we manage work? And that might cover multiple things, but generally Teams comes up as the primary answer that we start to use. So what I'm going to cover today is what are tasks? And I know that might seem like a strange place to start, but work tends to come down to tasks. So we'll go through some examples and what we need to actually manage. It comes up quite a lot in terms of, well, is a task just one definition across an organization, or are there multiple definitions of what a task is? So we'll cover off a bit of that. We'll go through some of the options that are available, and then we'll compare and contrast some of them and come up with some best practice tips for you so that you understand how best to use Teams to manage work. So starting off with what are tasks, it's quite an interesting question because a task could be anything. It could be, oh, I have to go shopping. It could be, I have to fix a tap. It could be, I need to complete a project by a given date. I need to present something. I need to pay someone. It could be all sorts of different things. But when we start to think of it within the context of an organization, we start to come up with some key sort of elements of data that we need to track. So, we'll start off with a description, and that could be as simple as, writing something down on a piece of paper and just writing a one line per task. There's a description of what you need to do. We very quickly get onto, maybe categorizing them. Are they personal? Are they for me? Are they related to a project? Are they related to a department? Are they related to a strategic initiative that we're implementing? So categories become very important. And then obviously, we have to prioritize them. If you're like me, you might have more tasks than you can do in a day. So therefore, you need to start to work out how to prioritize what you might have to do during that day. That may bring in due dates. Do I have a clear date that I need to complete something? Are other tasks maybe dependent on me completing something by that date? So knowing when things need to be completed is really important. And then if we start to get into project management, where we think of a traditional Gantt chart, then we might have a start date as well. I need to start it on one day, I need to finish it on another day. If I have started a task, then generally I will want to update a status. So I will want to say that actually it is in progress. Maybe that status is as simple as, not started, in progress, completed. It might be more granular than that. It might be that we're looking at percentage complete. We might have more reasons. I worked on one project and we had a status of waiting for Microsoft to release the feature. That happens quite a lot. If you're working with SharePoint and Office 365, you're waiting for things to roll out. So status can be really quite an important element of trying to prioritize tasks and helping you manage those tasks. And then we have assignee. Who is responsible for completing that task? If it's a personal task, it tends to just be you. But the more we move up, then we might have, an assignee being the person who's completing it. We might have project managers who are responsible for the overall delivery of a project. So knowing who's responsible for it starts to play a bigger part as we start to move up the scale from using individuals to team to enterprise. So when we're thinking about tasks, we need to think about that scaling up. If I'm thinking about my individual tasks, they're personal, they're for me. I write them down on a piece of paper. I don't necessarily need to share them with anybody. All I need to do is remember which piece of paper I'm looking at. But as soon as we start to get into a team of people, then we need to have a common place where we can all go and see those tasks, see the activities that need to be done, maybe have discussions that result in tasks being created as well. So we need to start working as a team. We then also need to be able to track it. Is everybody on track? Are they going to deliver on time? Have they started it? Have they not started it? So that's really important as soon as we start to share tasks within a team. We might start to have more governance in there. So if it were a project team, then maybe we need to start governing the tasks. Are they on track? Are they going to be delayed? If so, what's the impact? And we might want reporting. So we might want a burn down chart, for example, to say this is how well we're progressing. You know, there's a real advantage for everybody to know that actually tasks are being completed, work is being completed, and we're moving forward. When we start to look at the enterprise, though, we start to get much more. We have to govern it. We have to report on it. We have to be able to, you know, make it visible what our progress is. And also we start to use tasks to say, this is the workload. This is the workload this team might have. You know, you might be making hiring decisions around, you know, how much work is coming in and what your capacity is as a team to deliver that work. So it's very important to be able to actually forecast work based on the tasks that teams are actually managing. So we have these three different layers that we start to look at, and they all have slightly different requirements in terms of the granularity of the information which is needed in order to actually deliver on those different levels of expectation. So what do we start to need to manage? As we start to look into how we manage it, we're looking at maybe things that are more than just the tasks. You know, a backlog is a set of tasks, but maybe we haven't prioritized them all. So we need to understand, you know, what is in scope for us to deliver. We start to get into dependencies as well. You know, if I'm going to start a project, maybe I need to have some hardware delivered. Maybe I need to travel to a location to do that project. So maybe other projects need to finish first, or other tasks and activities need to finish first. So when we start to get into dependencies, you know, that gives us some of our prioritization. It allows us to plan and schedule things. When we're actually delivering on tasks, we need to know, what is it that we're actually doing? You know, what are our deliverables? Are there tangible outputs that we need to deliver? What are the assignments in terms of who's actually doing them? We need to monitor those tasks as well, our throughput or velocity. You know, how fast are we actually delivering the work that we are scheduled to do? And based on that, are we on track to deliver on time? Are we behind? Maybe we're ahead of schedule. We all like to be in that position. And based on, you know, our tracking, our monitoring, you know, if we are behind, what is the impact of the change? You know, at the moment, we see clients who are moving things around. There's different demands on our time. We're prioritizing projects differently, prioritizing activities differently. So therefore, there's a lot of change, and being able to manage that change and the impact gives us some tangible information to say we are going to be delayed or we're going to be ahead of schedule. So all of these things start to drive our decision making about what tool might be appropriate to actually monitor the work. So what options are available? Microsoft have never been shy of giving us lots of options. They never say, here is the one silver bullet that will solve all of your problems. So in this space, there's quite a few options that we have. So Exchange Task List has moved into To-Do, which is quite nice, but it does mean that we are not using Exchange Task List. And when you do come across organizations who have been using Exchange, it does come as a bit of a shock to them to have to start using To-Do. But we also have other things. So we've got Planner. I imagine most people are familiar with Planner, have at least seen it. And then we've got SharePoint task lists, and these have been around for as long as SharePoint has been around. And there are some distinct advantages to using SharePoint in this way. And a lot of organizations have built quite robust business processes based on SharePoint task lists. So those will inevitably continue to be used in certain scenarios. And then we have things like shifts. So if you have organizations that have shift workers, so maybe you're running in a retail environment or hospitality and you have shift workers, then shifts works very well. When you start to get more into that enterprise project management, then we have Project Online, and then we have a new member of that family, Project for the Web, which is kind of halfway between Planner and Project Online. And those are really for that enterprise project management, being able to store information in a common way, build reporting, and importantly, be able to do forecasting. Project Online has timesheets as well, so if you need timesheets, then Project Online is the place to go. And then we have Power Apps, which Power Apps kind of sit on top of quite a few of these other things. So you can put a Power App on top of a SharePoint task list. You can integrate it with Planner. You can integrate it with Project for the Web. So Power Apps, although there are different flavors, there's the Canvas and model-driven apps. They do sit on top of one of the other storage mechanisms that we would tend to use. Dynamics is in there. Dynamics is in there because if you're in the sales space, Dynamics is your tool of choice. It is where you go to manage all of your work and all of your tasks. And that's where it should be, because it needs to be in one place so that you've got a record of all the activities that are taking place in relation to either sales. You might be using field service. So that leaky tap, that might be in one of the houses that you own as a housing association. So therefore field service will support that. Dynamics has a lot of different, very specialist ways of managing specialist tasks. And then we've got Azure Boards. So if you're a software developer, then you're probably familiar with Azure Boards or Team Foundation Services. And again, it's very specialist in terms of the way that those tasks are being stored, because it integrates with how code is being developed and maybe testing and releases. So it's got a lot more than just the task management. So where does that leave us with regards to Teams? Teams allows us to use quite a few of these. So what I'm going to go through is how we would use Teams and basically just be able to use SharePoint task list, Planner, To Do, and Azure Boards. The first three, they're all part of a standard Office 365 A1, E1, E3 license. And Azure Boards, I'm going to show that because that's a really simple way to bring Azure Boards into Teams and bring that integration together. So without further ado, let's pop into some demos. So let me find the right screen. So what I'm looking at here is Teams. So I've got quite a few different projects in here, and I've got project 1 and I've got project site 1. These are quite different ways of managing projects. It's not really clear, how you manage a project until you really understand what makes up that project. So if we think about work, we might have, say, a department, and a department might have multiple projects. So project site 1, and then we've got multiple projects, project 1A, project 1B, and each of these might be discrete projects. So your IT department might have multiple projects in here. We as a consultancy, we have one team per client, and then we have multiple projects for that client. The alternative is to have a project where you have maybe multiple teams coming together, multidisciplinary teams coming together for one project, and they have different elements that they need to deliver to make up that project. So 2 different patterns that we can use. They both deliver fundamentally the same thing, but there's a few things that we need to take into consideration here. So when we're looking at, say, a single project, we look at the general channel and maybe we're bringing in files. So we have our standard files in here, and we'll have a folder for each channel. So we've got our general, and then we can have different files for each of the other channels. But we might also bring in risks. And if you were watching Chirag's presentation earlier, this is just bringing in a SharePoint list. And I'll go through how we set all of this up as well. But this is basically saying we've got a list on our SharePoint site, and we're just bringing it in as into our general channel because it's risks across the whole project. We can do the same with issues, and that helps us because we have them all in one place. Where we then have maybe finance, We have finance maybe as a private channel, because maybe there are conversations and files that shouldn't be shared with everybody else working on the project. And then maybe we've got our product development, for example. And we don't necessarily have to have our risks and issues in every channel. We know we can find them in our general channel. But in product development, for example, maybe we've got Azure Boards in here, and that would bring in, our view of Azure Boards, so that as a member of the product development team, I can see the status. But if I'm as a developer, maybe I'm just living in Azure Boards, but this information is still visible in this location. So because we can have our different tabs going into our different channels, we have flexibility in terms of what we want to see. Our sales team might have Dynamics coming in as a tab. Our marketing team might have Google Analytics coming in as a tab. So we can have those different tabs for those different teams, but all making up this single project. Now, we may also be using Planner and OneNote. Now, in OneNote, what I tend to do if we've got one project is to say, within here, you'll have a different section. I don't know whether you're familiar with the limitations that Microsoft have put on it, but OneNote, you need to actually open it up in the web to edit it now rather than in Teams. But in here, we can see Project A and Project A Notebook. Now, this is Project A. So if I just flip over to OneNote, what this means is that each section in that OneNote is within this OneNote. So we've got one section for each channel. That means that if I want to open this on my machine and sync it down, I have one OneNote notebook to sync down for all of those areas. And we're sharing information, we're collaborating with one notebook. So it's quite an important concept, one section per channel in there. When we come into Planner, we may be doing something similar. So we may be managing the work that we have based on tasks in here, but because again we are one project team here, maybe we're using tabs. So we've got general, marketing, product development to align with the channels that we've got. So we've got the labels, and we can bring this in and we can say, okay, so I've got my label in here, I can have one for each channel I've got, and I can use these, I can assign these, I can manage all of these quite easily. And if I need to actually look at it and say, actually, rather than buckets, I want to group it by those different labels, then I can do that. And I can see the way all of the tasks are broken down by the different teams that are contributing to my particular project. And obviously in here, we've got things like putting in, we can reference documents, we can reference sites in here, so URLs, we can put our lists on. So we've still got all of the capabilities that we know and love about Planner to help us manage this. But when we start to really, think about how we prioritize these, how we want to present these, we can change this around quite easily. It's one planner for the whole team. Everybody in the project is working on this same planner. Now, really importantly, when I've created this, I've called this planner Project A. And that will become clear in a while as to why. But because there's one planner, I always use the name of the team to describe that planner. If I come across to Project Site 1, so that I've got multiple projects in here, so I don't necessarily want to have the same notebook, the same planner here, and I don't necessarily want to have the same risks and issues. So I've got risks and issues in here. Now, ideally, I would love it if we could actually choose a default view, but what I have here is some views set up where I can filter the risks and the issues. They're all set up the same way to filter them against this particular project. So it's not too difficult for me to see only the risks that are related to this project. And again, these are SharePoint lists, so we can trigger things like, flow around these to say if it changes, if a new one's added, notify people, drop adaptive cards into Teams. We can do all of that automation around these risks. But we also have Planner in here, and this planner is set up to be specific to this particular project, and the same with OneNote. We've got a OneNote notebook set up. So if I click over to OneNote for the web here, actually I've already got it. If I click the notebooks, I can see I've got Project A notebook and I've got Project 1A. So I've got different notebooks for each project. And for me, that means that it's easier for people who are engaging on a particular project. So they can open that notebook, they can sync that one particular notebook down to their machine, and they can use that one notebook. So again, the naming is really important to say Project 1A. I know what that OneNote relates to, the same as Planner. So what does this actually look like in SharePoint? So if I come into SharePoint, I might want to actually create a new site. Now, the way I've used all of this, I've got site designs here. So if I come into a team site and say I want to create a new project site, those risks and issues lists are all set up in here. So I'm going to say Teams Fest demo and pray to the demo gods that this works. It sometimes takes a little while. So we'll set that off and running. So one of the things to remember here is when I'm in my risks and issues, what I want to actually happen is for things to happen quickly and easily. So things like the project name, the conditional formatting around my risk level, I don't want to have to put all of those in every time. So when I'm using the site designs to create this, let's finish that, just see whether that's gone through. I'm provisioning the risks and issues. I'm provisioning content types to manage those, the conditional formatting, that's all part of the site design that's being implemented. So if everything goes according to plan, this will come up. Maybe I'll just leave that one running. Let's just open up in a new tab and come into Project Site 1. Let's go into that one. So in Project Site 1, what I have in here, so you can see we've got the folders that relate to the channels that we had, and we've got our risks and issues. So if I go to see all of my risks, I can see all of them in here. And if I want to edit these, what I have for projects is I've got a term set up that allows me to add those different projects in and add the labels. And that's quite important because I'm using one term set for all of my projects. And I've actually, as part of the site design, I'm joining it to a hub site. So if I go into the hub site, I can see all of the projects that I might be working on in one location. And I can also, because I'm using content types, I can bring together all of the issues. I can bring together all of the risks from all of the sites that are associated with this hub site. So it's quite a neat way just to bring together more of your program manager view. I want to see all open risks. I want to see all of the issues in one place. So let's just see whether this has completed. I had this morning where it wasn't actually running through. So essentially what it does is it runs through all of these things and it ends up building a site that's got everything that we need. Now, I said about the naming of the planner, it was really important. The other thing that is really useful here is to use to do. And when we look at to do, we start to see tasks that are coming through. They are assigned to me. I'm going to see them in here. And when I see these are all assigned to me from projects. So I can see Project A, overdue yesterday, Project A, Project 1A, Project 1A. Now that is the name of the planner task. So if you just put something in called planner, you'll look at this and you'll have no idea about the context of these tasks and where they sit within those different teams. Now, obviously you can click on these and you can open it in planner, but ideally, you want to have the information, know that it's important, be able to flag them as important so that you can see them in your important list. So we've got those coming in here, and then you want to be able to add them to my day so that I know what I'm actually trying to do today, and I can come in and say, right, these are the things that I'm going to do. And then obviously we all do this, don't we? We all complete the tasks that we plan to do in a day. So ticking it as done. And then you're in a good place. You've finished all of your tasks. And obviously the benefit of this is if it's assigned to you and it's got dates, you can see what's scheduled for you. You can see what's assigned to you, whether it's got a date or not, but you can also flag emails, and then you can also have your personal task lists as well, so that you can come in and you can say, actually, I need to do all of these. So it's a combination of both your team tasks and the tasks that you want to do personally. And I think, you know, To Do it's a fantastic tool to use because it gives you that one insight into all of the tasks across the board. What it doesn't do, though, is if you were assigning tasks in SharePoint, it doesn't give you those. So if you think of a risk as a task, you know, we might be saying that we want to assign it and say, well, the owner is me, although I hate taking on ownership of anything. But if I take on the ownership of this, it's not going to show up in To Do as a task. So that's something to think about. You can use Flow to integrate, but you're not necessarily going to have all of those things coming through. That being said, you can still say, you know, put a view in to say my tasks or my risks and see a personalized view, and that will give you that insight so that you've got visibility of these, but you would still need to navigate to that location. So very conscious of time, so let me come back to the presentation. So what I've shown you is a very quick view of what we can do with Teams using essentially SharePoint and Planner, OneNote, and To Do. And so some things to think about. Your team or channel, you know, do you have one project that needs multiple teams to come together to deliver it? Or is it a department or a client, as we use it, with multiple projects within it? So think about whether, you know, a project is being represented by a team or a channel. And then based on that, you should be able to work out whether you want a single OneNote or many to track content and notes related to that project, and the same with the planner, so that you know that whether you've got, you know, one planner or multiple planners. Think about those naming conventions. It's really important so that when you look at planners outside of the context of Teams, you can see what they relate to. And then metadata, you know, as we were showing, we can use the metadata within a SharePoint list to provide filters. And if we're going to use it, then we need to make sure that we're planning upfront for that, to say this project, this list, we can filter it in these ways, and therefore we've got the metadata there to actually present that. So when it comes back to all of those tools that we had, I've kind of shown you everything that's on the left, and Microsoft To Do is great for personal tasks. It gives you a personal view of your planner tasks that are assigned to you in combination with tasks that you're managing and emails that maybe you've flagged. When we start to move into that team space, we're looking more around using Planner. We're looking at SharePoint task lists potentially. So SharePoint task lists, it's easier to customize them, to put more metadata in them, to put custom fields in there, so that if you've got a task that has very particular requirements around data or categorization, that can work a lot better than Planner because you've got more flexibility. At that point, you need to really start thinking about how you present those tasks and how you aggregate them together, because you won't necessarily have the same centralized visibility that you would have with To Do. And that would be where you would maybe look at putting a Canvas app together, so that you've got visibility of those custom tasks, and maybe you've got, you know, a better interface for updating them rather than using a SharePoint task list. And certainly if your users need to be out and about on the move, then using a Canvas app to actually present those SharePoint tasks can be a really good solution. Again, we've got To Do because we're bringing those tasks in from Planner. And then at the bottom there, we've got Azure Boards, and we can bring that directly into Teams. There's a out of the box tab that we can use, so that works really, really well. Just to say, make it visible. It doesn't mean everybody has to work in Teams, but it does mean that it's visible, and so therefore when you're having your conversations in relation to tasks, you can have those in the same location. And then we've got obviously the more project and program management elements of Project for the Web and Project Online, which Project for the Web brings in things like dependencies and milestones and Gantt charts into a planner-like interface. So it's very, very familiar to anybody who uses Planner, but it just has more capabilities. And then obviously we've got custom solutions. So Power Apps, we can do pretty much anything in Power Apps using Canvas apps based on whatever data source we want to, or model-driven apps using CDS and the security and the ease of building interfaces in model-driven apps. And then obviously we've got portals if we want to bring external people in and public people into the mix around our work management. And then with Dynamics, we've got sales, field service, and project service automation. And those are all very specific ways to manage tasks and work within a tool that is designed to manage it. So things like scheduling engines or in field service, working out locations and paths and bringing AI into the mix to manage, what activities you should be doing. That's all part of Dynamics 365. So kind of whiz through that. So are there any questions? Let me flip over and have a look and see what's going on in the chats. So let's just see what questions we've got. New messages. Okay, no questions at all. Okay, well, if you do think of any questions, we will be publishing the slides, and I think the sessions will be, the videos will be there as well. And if you reach out on Twitter if you have any questions for me, and please do fill in the feedback. It really helps us to understand what's good, what's bad, and improve sessions for the next time. Everything is going to YouTube later. There you go. So you'll be able to re-watch this on YouTube. But yeah, as I say, please fill in the feedback. And if you do have any questions, just let me know. I'll be in the chat till probably about 1 o'clock. So if there is anything that you here's a question. How do you handle task dependencies with Planner? Yeah, that's an interesting challenge. There is no direct dependency that you can put in to say that things need to be completed prior to a task starting. So there isn't an easy way to do that. The recommendation would be that you either move up to using Project for the Web, which does allow you to put dependencies in, or you look to use things like SharePoint task lists because they also have dependencies. But it's one of the shortcomings. It's one of those things that Planner is around task management rather than project management. So where we start to see the term project management being used, we start to expect to have dependencies, milestones, Gantt charts, those sorts of capabilities. But the task management, the sort of the Kanban side of things, isn't as rigid as that. So the only other way to think about dependencies within Planner is to think it needs to go through particular phases, and therefore you can't move things until a particular task is there, has moved through. But it's not an easy thing to set up in terms of having a rigid rule to say you can't move something. Louise has asked, is it the general Microsoft channel on YouTube? I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming it will be a Teams Fest channel, but I'm sure we'll be publicising it on LinkedIn and on Twitter as soon as we know exactly what the links are going to be to the YouTube sessions. Can I give some examples on how I use SharePoint lists in the real world? So far, some people use it to track issues, like in a help desk system, but I'm not convinced. So I'm working with an organisation that has a variety of different use cases for task management. One of them is committees. So they have senior committees, and they need to be able to publicize actions for people to complete. So they're using SharePoint task lists because Planner isn't flexible enough, and they need to have an audit trail. So they issue tasks, they assign them to people. They have flows to notify people that they've been assigned a task and to chase them when it's due. They have the ability they have views set up to see, my tasks, so that I can see only the tasks that are assigned to me. And they're using the SharePoint task list very, very effectively in that way. And that purely is because they need more fields, more categorization, and they need that automation as well, and the auditing. So they've got the history. All of those are good reasons to use SharePoint task lists rather than using Planner, because Planner doesn't have that history. It doesn't have an audit of when things have changed. And because you can't change, the fields that are there, you're stuck with those. It doesn't have the flexibility that a lot of organizations need. So that's a good scenario where you would be looking at managing tasks using the SharePoint task list rather than using Planner. And again, that comes back to how you would use metadata, how you can then bring views into Teams to say, actually, maybe the default view is the personal view filtered on me. Therefore, I can always see the tasks that are assigned to me. So I hope that helps, Alex. So if any of you are stuck for anything to do on Friday, there's SharePoint Saturday Warsaw online, which is actually on a Friday now. So I'll be going into more detail about Project for the Web on that one as well. So have a look for that, sbsevents.org. And yes, I will, as I say, if there's any more questions, just reach out. I'll be here till about 1 o'clock. But enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy the rest of the great content from the other speakers today.